The Seattle rain soaked through her coat as Ariel Monroe stood motionless on the steps of the mansion that was no longer hers. One suitcase, one box, one hand resting on her stomach. She was visibly pregnant and utterly alone. Her husband, Preston, had just slapped her across the face and handed her divorce papers, right in front of his mother, Elaine, who sneered as he spat the words, "You're a barren tree pretending to bloom." Ariel's vision blurred with tears, but she didn't scream. She walked away. Now, 5 years later, that same woman stood in a shimmering black gown, accepting a standing ovation at the Northwest Women's Legal Gala. No one clapped harder than her twin sons. How did a woman thrown out with nothing but 2 unborn babies become one of the most respected attorneys in Seattle? If you've ever fought for your worth, hit like, subscribe, and stay till the end. Ariel Monroe was 31, elegant, sharp-minded, and once considered one of the most promising young architects in Seattle. She loved clean lines, natural light, and the feeling of breathing life into a space from the ground up. That passion had brought her to Preston, Langston, a third second-grade homes across the Pacific Northwest. Their love story had started like a dream. Cocktail parties, magazine spreads, a wedding featured in Seattle Bride, complete with drone shots and custom vows. But beneath the glossy surface, the cracks had always been there. Ariel had survived a brutal car accident in her early 20s, one that nearly ended her life and left her with internal scarring doctors warned might complicate pregnancy. Still, she hoped. For nearly 4 years, she tried everything: hormone therapy, IVF, holistic treatments. Each failed cycle brought silent heartbreak. Preston was never cruel about it in the beginning, just increasingly distant. But Elaine, his mother, was never subtle. She called Ariel a showroom wife, said she had a beautiful face, but hollow soil. Ariel learned to smile through it, to design in silence and cry when no one was looking. Elaine made it clear she had never approved of the marriage. She saw Ariel as ornamental, not maternal. She wanted bloodline, legacy, heirs to carry the Langston name and inherit the Langston empire. Ariel tried harder. She attended fertility seminars, journaled her every vitamin, pretended not to notice when Elaine moved framed photos of her to the back shelf. What broke her wasn't the failure to conceive. It was the isolation that followed. One night, after another failed round of treatment, Ariel sat across from Preston in their penthouse kitchen and gently said, "Maybe it's time we consider adoption. There are children in this world who need love." Preston's fork froze mid-air. "What are we, some charity case now?" he muttered. Elaine, sitting nearby, scoffed audibly. "Adoption would be a mother, however that happens." That was the moment something snapped. Preston stood, slammed his glass onto the marble counter, and called her delusional. "You'll never be a mother, Ariel. You were born broken, and now you want to bring broken things into this family." Then, in front of Elaine, he slapped her, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to kill something inside. Ariel stood in shock, one hand to her cheek, her world suddenly airless. Elaine didn't blink. She stood up, handed Ariel a manila envelope, and said coldly, "It's best we make this clean. The prenup will hold." Inside were divorce papers already signed by Preston. Ariel was being discarded like an outdated blueprint. She wasn't even allowed to pack herself. 2 suitcases and a banker's box of personal items had been placed at the front door. The maid avoided her gaze. No one asked if she had anywhere to go. No one asked if she was okay. Ariel walked down those marble stairs in silence, past the crystal chandelier she had designed herself, and into the cold Seattle night with no umbrella, no plan, and no clue that something inside her had already begun to grow. Ariel left the Langston mansion with nothing but 2 suitcases, a banker's box, and a knot of disbelief curled in her stomach. The rain didn't let up for days, drenching the city in a cold, gray silence that mirrored her own. By the end of the week, she was renting a 400-square-foot studio apartment in Tacoma. The apartment had peeling paint, a lingering smell of mildew, and a heating system that coughed more than it warmed. But it was hers. For the first time in years, Ariel was no one's ornament. She was just surviving. She emailed over 30 firms within the first 10 days, offering freelance design services, portfolio samples, anything that could keep her afloat. Most didn't respond. The ones that did offered polite rejections. One finally called her in, but she noticed the firm's tone had changed once they heard her last name. Elaine's influence, she realized, had followed her even here. It wasn't just rejection, it was sabotage. Still, she showed up to the interview, head held high, makeup precise, heels slightly scuffed from walking in the rain. The office was modest, maybe 5 employees. Halfway through presenting a design pitch, Ariel's vision began to blur. She collapsed onto the floor. The next thing she remembered was the sterile white light of a hospital room and the soft beep of a monitor. A nurse gently told her she had fainted from exhaustion and low blood sugar. Then the doctor came in, clipboard in hand, a strange look on his face. "I ran a few tests," he said. "And you're pregnant." Ariel blinked. "That's impossible," she whispered. Her voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. The doctor paused, then offered a gentle smile. "It's not only possible, it's twins." Everything stopped. The air thickened. Time folded in on itself. Ariel couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even cry. All she could do was stare at the ceiling, her heart racing and her mind spiraling. Pregnant. With twins. After years of heartbreak, failed treatments, and being told she was barren. After being discarded for being broken. She lay in that hospital bed for hours, listening to the echo of Preston's voice, Elaine's snart, the slap across her face. Every part of her wanted to scream, to curl up and disappear. But then a flicker of something else, something fierce, rose inside her. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was survival. But it was there, undeniable. She looked down at her belly, still flat, still quiet, and whispered, "You're real, you're mine." The world may have taken everything from her, but this was hers to protect. In that moment, Ariel Monroe made a silent vow. She wouldn't let Preston or Elaine define her worth. If no one was going to save her, she would build a life from the rubble. And this time, it would be unshakable. Ariel stood outside the Langston Development headquarters in the freezing January wind, clutching a letter from her OB-GYN and an ultrasound photo. She hadn't come for money. She had come to tell Preston the truth, that despite everything, she was pregnant with his children. She never got past the marble front lobby. Security blocked her before she could even see the receptionist. "Mr. Langston isn't taking unscheduled visitors," they told her. Jennifer, Preston's longtime assistant, glanced up, made eye contact, and then turned her back. Ariel stood there for nearly 10 minutes before finally walking away, heart hammering, tears threatening, but never falling. Bills piled up. Ariel sold her designer bags and shoes online. Eventually, she found work as a night janitor at the Tacoma Public Library. It paid next to nothing, but it was steady, and it gave her access to warmth, books, and silence. 3 things she hadn't had in months. She cleaned bathrooms while reading case law textbooks from the legal section, scribbling notes on the back of her timesheets during break. Her pregnancy became increasingly difficult. At 28 weeks, she went into early labor. She was alone when it started, clutching the armrest of a city bus, doubled over in pain. Ethan and Lucas were born premature, tiny and fragile, needing round-the-clock NICU care. The hospital was kind but firm. She had no job, no health insurance, and the medical bills were climbing into the 6 figures. She stayed by their incubators day and night, sleeping upright in a plastic chair, praying for their lungs to strengthen. One night, an older man named Luis, who lived in her apartment building, noticed her struggling to carry a donated box of diapers up the stairs. He offered to help. She hesitated, but eventually let him in. Luis was a retired family attorney, widowed, quiet, and gentle. Over the following weeks, he brought meals, helped navigate hospital paperwork, and simply listened. One evening, while Ariel was venting about being powerless, about Preston's betrayal, and how broken the system felt, Louise said something that would change everything. You should think about law school. Not for revenge, for resilience, for protection. You're sharp, articulate, and now you know what it's like to be powerless. That's what makes a damn good lawyer. Ariel stayed up late after first. Her in law school? But Louise didn't joke. He brought her application packets, sat with her as she filled out financial aid forms, and even called in a favor to help with the essay review. Ariel stayed up late every night after feeding the twins, studying vocabulary, researching programs, and convincing herself that this wasn't delusion, it was direction. When the acceptance letter arrived, part-time evening program at Seattle College of Law, Ariel stood frozen in her kitchen, her twins cooing nearby in secondhand bassinets. She was building, and she was far from done. By the time Ariel entered her second semester at Seattle College of Law, her days began at 4:00 a.m. sharp. She'd quietly rise before the twins, prep formula, fold a load of laundry, and pack lunches while reviewing case law at the kitchen counter. Lucas and Ethan, now toddlers, had become her living alarm clocks, wide-eyed and full of energy before dawn. She'd drop them off at a subsidized daycare near campus, and then head straight to her part-time job at the Northwest Women's Justice Project, where she worked as a paralegal. Her shifts ended just in time for evening classes, which stretched late into the night. It was grueling. There were moments when her body ached, her vision blurred, and she felt like breaking. But every time she looked at her sons' faces, she remembered why she started. Lucas had his father's jawline, but none of his cruelty. Ethan had Ariel's eyes, wide and watchful. They gave her purpose. They were her compass. At work, Ariel assisted clients filing restraining orders, navigating custody disputes, and escaping abusive relationships. She saw versions of her old self in nearly every woman who walked through the door, confused, abandoned, desperate for protection in a system stacked against them. Her personal pain made her precise. Her legal knowledge made her powerful. Professors took notice. She earned top marks in constitutional law and family court advocacy. One even told her she had a voice that shakes walls, something Ariel never imagined hearing during her architecture years. Luis, her mentor, cheered her on from the sidelines, attending her mock trials and crying quietly during her first courtroom argument. Years passed, and Ariel graduated near the top of her class. Passing the bar exam felt like an exorcism of doubt, of pain, of silence. With help from a nonprofit grant and donations from former clients, Ariel launched Monroe Legal Alliance. Her vision was clear: offer sharp, affordable legal support to women left out of the system. She didn't want prestige, she wanted protection. And she built her practice one woman at a time. The twins grew into fiercely compassionate boys. They took turns shredding paper at the office, organizing mail, even brewing coffee for staff and visitors. Ariel taught them to open doors, to listen without interrupting, and to never let power go unchecked. The firm wasn't just a job, it was their home, their mission, their redemption story, in real time. One evening, after dinner, Ethan sat beside Ariel with a question that had been building for years. "Mom, why don't we know our dad?" Lucas looked up too. The room fell still. Ariel paused, then nodded slowly. She led them into her office, where she kept a folder labeled Truth. She told them about Preston, who he was, what he did, and why she walked away. She didn't vilify. She told the truth, and when she was done, Ethan reached over and held her hand. Lucas simply said, "You're our parent. That's enough." Ariel exhaled. It was the first time she let go of the last fragment of shame she'd carried. Not because they forgave her, but because she had nothing left to hide. Her sons knew her, loved her, and now they understood her. That was the moment she truly became whole. Ariel didn't recognize the last name on the intake form at first. Melissa Harrison. She was another referral from the Women's Justice Project, May 30th, stay-at-home wife of a wealthy Seattle executive with a history of financial manipulation and subtle emotional abuse. Ariel had handled dozens of cases like it, but during mediation week, the name finally clicked. Harrison. Preston's mother's maiden name. The confirmation came as soon as they walked into the neutral mediation room. Preston Langston entered the room like a king, summoned to a court he thought he still owned. Behind him came Elaine, looking just as icy as she had the day she watched Ariel walk away in the rain, and Rebecca, his fiancée, a tall brunette with designer sunglasses and a resting smirk. Preston's eyes flicked over to the mediation documents, then froze at the attached client photo of Ariel and Melissa shaking hands. In the background were framed photos of twin boys, Lucas and Ethan, now 7, smiling with missing teeth and soccer uniforms. His jaw clenched. "Ariel," he said, the word tumbling out before he could stop it. Ariel didn't flinch. "Mr. Langston," she said evenly, "you're not part of this mediation. You may step outside." Elaine's scoff echoed through the room. "She's still playing victim." Ariel met her gaze. "You watched him hit me and called it justified. Let's not pretend you care about truth now." Preston didn't leave. Instead, his eyes stayed locked on the photo of the boys. The resemblance was unmistakable. After the session ended, Preston waited in the hallway. When Ariel emerged, he stepped into her path. "They're mine, aren't they?" "They're mine," she answered, "and that's all you need to know." "Please," he said quietly, "let me explain. There's nothing you could say now that undoes what you did then. You made your choice, I made mine." That night, Preston emailed her firm. He left voicemails and then a letter, handwritten, addressed not to Ariel but to Ethan and Lucas. In it, he acknowledged his cruelty. He admitted to abandoning her, to choosing his mother's approval over his marriage, to calling her barren, even though he knew she had never truly given up hope. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He asked for honesty. He wrote, "If I deserve to know them, let them decide. But I needed them to know I was wrong." Ariel sat with that letter for 3 days. Then she let the twins read it. Their response was surprising. Lucas said, "I want to ask him stuff." Ethan added, "I just want to know why." So Ariel let them write him a letter. No promises, just questions. "Why did you leave?" "Me too. Did you ever wonder about us?" "Why didn't you try to find us sooner?" Preston wrote back within a week. His handwriting was messier, the words vulnerable. He told them the truth, that he had been afraid, that his mother told him Ariel was manipulative, that he hadn't believed it until years later, when he saw how his mother treated Rebecca's sister for being a single mom, that he'd spent years convincing himself they didn't exist, just to avoid guilt, that seeing their faces shattered everything. It was Lucas who asked, "Can we meet him?" Ariel agreed, but with supervision and boundaries. The first meeting was held at a family counseling center. Preston walked in nervously, no designer suit, just jeans and a sweater. He brought photo albums of himself as a kid. He cried when Lucas asked if he'd ever wanted to be a dad. He didn't try to hug them. He didn't overstep. He just answered their questions. When they left, Ethan turned to Ariel and said, "He's trying." Ariel, who once stood in the rain with nothing but a box of memories and unborn children, looked at her sons, and finally felt peace. Not because Preston had changed, but because she had given her boys the power of choice. Not silence, not shame. Just truth. In the months following their first meeting, Ariel allowed Ethan and Lucas to exchange letters with Preston. Eventually, she agreed to supervised monthly visits at a family therapy center. Preston showed up on time, brought thoughtful gifts, nothing extravagant, just things like their favorite books or soccer gear. He listened more than he spoke, never pushed for hugs, and never tried to rewrite the past. The boys were cautious but curious. Ariel monitored everything closely, always prepared to pull back, but gradually she saw a genuine effort, a different man than the one who'd thrown her into the cold. While the boys explored this newfound connection with guarded hope, Ariel poured herself into her work. Monroe Legal Alliance expanded. taking on more cases, hiring more staff, and becoming a cornerstone for women in crisis. Word spread across Seattle. If you were a woman facing the impossible, Monroe Legal Alliance made the impossible manageable. Ariel was invited to speak at the Northwest Women's Justice Gala. She hesitated at first. Public speaking was never her dream, but Lou encouraged her, reminding her of how far she'd come. That night, she stood before a packed ballroom in an emerald gown borrowed from a friend. The woman introducing her was Jessica, one of her very first clients. Jessica's voice broke as she told the audience how Ariel had saved her from an abusive marriage and helped her win full custody of her daughter. "She didn't just change my life," Jessica said. "She saved it." When Ariel took the stage, the room erupted into applause. In the front row, Ethan and Lucas stood beside Lou, their faces glowing with pride. But just beyond them, sitting near the back in awkward silence, were Preston, Elaine, and Rebecca. Preston looked stunned. Rebecca was unreadable. Elaine sat very still, hands folded tightly in her lap. After the event, Rebecca approached Ariel quietly in the lobby. She admitted she hadn't known the truth, that she believed Preston had just ended a bitter marriage. Seeing Ariel and the boys, hearing what really happened, shattered her perception. Within weeks, she left Preston, returning to her hometown to restart her career. 2 months later, Ariel received a package in the mail. It was from Elaine. Inside was a well-worn leather journal and a handwritten note. Elaine had filled the pages with reflections about her own youth, about the pressure she faced as a woman married into wealth, and how she had projected her bitterness onto Ariel. "I thought I was protecting my son," the final entry read, "but I see now that I was only continuing the harm I swore I'd never repeat. I'm sorry." A few weeks later, Preston called. Elaine was dying. Cancer, fast-moving. She was in hospice care and had asked to see Ariel and the boys. Ariel struggled with the decision, but ultimately said yes. Not for Elaine, but for the boys. The visit was quiet. Elaine was frail, her voice thin. She took Ariel's hand with surprising gentleness. "I was wrong," she whispered, "and you were strong. Stronger than I ever was." She looked at the boys, tears in her eyes. "I hope you grow up to be more like your mother than like me." Ariel didn't offer forgiveness, but she offered presence, and sometimes that was more than enough. When they left the hospice center, Ethan turned to Ariel and asked, "Did it help?" Ariel nodded slowly. "Maybe not for her, but maybe for us." The sun poured gently through the stained glass windows of a quiet chapel tucked into the outskirts of Seattle, where the air held the soft scent of lilacs and promise. Ariel stood behind the closed doors in a sleek, ivory gown that shimmered with understated elegance. Her hands were steady, her breath calm. This was nothing like the last time she wore white. This time, no one was forcing her into a future. She was walking into one she had built. At her side stood Ethan and Lucas, now 10 years old and beaming with pride in their matching suits. "You look like a queen," Lucas whispered. Ethan added, "A warrior queen." Ariel laughed, fighting back tears. Jason Patel waited at the altar, calm, kind, and exactly where he belonged. Years ago, he had been the NICU doctor who stayed long after his shift to check on the boys. Then he became a steady friend when Ariel was juggling law school and motherhood. Over time, that quiet friendship blossomed into something deeper. He never rushed her, never asked her to be anyone but herself. As Ariel walked down the aisle, flanked by her sons, every step echoed with the memory of where she had come from. She passed familiar faces: Lou, her mentor at Jessica, her first client, even a few former classmates from law school. Near the back, she caught a glimpse of Preston. He stood quietly with a woman at his side, not seeking attention, just watching with a small, respectful nod. He had changed. He had given up the Langston business and was coaching Little League. Ariel didn't hate him anymore. She simply didn't need anything from him. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Jason's vows were steady and heartfelt. Ariel's voice trembled once, but only because Lucas wiped his eyes, and she lost her composure for a moment. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the room erupted in applause. Later, at the reception held in the garden of a women's shelter Ariel helped fund, guests sipped cider under strings of lights and danced barefoot on the grass. Ethan gave a short toast, saying, "My mom doesn't just love, she protects. And she teaches us to do the same." As the evening wore on, Ariel stole a quiet moment alone. She watched her boys chase each other across the lawn, Jason spinning Jessica's daughter in a dance, and Lou sitting peacefully beneath a tree. It struck her, like a soft wind through her chest. This was family. Not the kind you are born into, but the kind you build upward by brick, bruise by bruise, choice by choice. And in that moment, with laughter in the air and love at her feet, Ariel Monroe finally knew she had won. Not with revenge, not with wealth, but with a life that no one, not even Preston Langston, could take from her again. Sometimes, Ariel would catch herself standing at the window of her office, watching her boys walk into school with backpacks slung over their shoulders, faces full of life and confidence. It hit her then, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a quiet truth. She had built this, not through revenge, not through bitterness, but with strength, persistence, and love that never gave up, even when the world did. Monroe Legal Alliance continued to grow, helping women rewrite their stories. Her team called her relentless, her clients called her a lifeline, but Ariel didn't see herself as a savior. She was someone who'd once been abandoned, humiliated, and left for nothing. And she turned that into something lasting, something real. Her boys thrived, not just in grades or sports, but in empathy. They held doors open, they stood up for friends, they talked about fairness like it was sacred. She no longer saw herself as a broken woman piecing herself together. She was a builder of futures, a mother, a protector, a force of justice. And as she looked back on every moment she nearly gave up, she knew this: the crown isn't given. It's forged through fire, worn by those who rise and rise again. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because your pain doesn't define your worth. What you do after the pain, that's where the power lives. Subscribe to Veiled Fury for more stories of transformation, truth, and unstoppable strength.